Oh, hello. Didn't see you there. My name's Alyssa Ciafani, and today I'll be bringing you the riveting, the life-altering, the devastatingly exciting top 11 events of the 1920s. Now, you may be sitting there inquiring, why 11, Alyssa? Well, I'll tell you why, concerned student. The answer's twofold. One, 11's an unconventional number. And most importantly, too, I know Lauren only did 10. I just raised the bar, Lauren. Come join me up here. Now on to our countdown. Coming in at number 11, we have the dashing, if not quiet, Mr. Calvin Coolidge. Calvin Coolidge, number 30, Republican, 1923 to 1929. This quiet guy had quite a few notable moments. On his highlight reel we have the Indian Citizenship Act. This granted our native foes, finally, American citizenship. Also, Mr. Coolidge passed the Radio Act of 1927. This regulated the Federal Radio Commission. Thanks for that, Cal. As for a fun fact about our man, he was dubbed by the name of Silent Cal. Never really had that much to say. On to number 10 on our countdown, we have the creation of the 18th Amendment. An amendment unpopular with our German friends. This amendment made the sale, transportation, consumption, and creation of alcohol illegal in the good US of A. However, irony is always a dark shadow, and this apparent success in the prohibition movement actually only led to more crime and corruption in America. Not so shockingly, this amendment was repealed in 1933, and the only shocking thing about this repeal was that it took 12 years. Coming in at number 9 on our countdown was the mass communications culture of the decade. The 1920s brought about our first movies, commonly referred to as the talkies, and this led to the first Oscar awards in history. In 1928, the Best Picture was Wings. I do believe that I saw this movie in the Blockbuster the other day under the 5 for 20 section next to all the other Oscar winners that nobody actually watches. Also, listening to the radio became the hot thing to do with the family. Not only this, but an interest in America's favorite pastime. No, no friend, not going to McDonald's, watching baseball. This became very popular during the 1920s. Mr. Babe Ruth was one of the biggest celebrities out there. I suppose you could thank the 1920s for television, the movies, and our current obsession with pop culture. Coming in at number 8 on our countdown was the revival of the Ku Klux Klan. This is one revival I can assure you no one was looking forward to. This group, commonly called the KKK, believed in native, white, Protestant supremacy. In 1922, they elected Hiram W. Evans as their Imperial Wizard, aka leader. I can assure you that Dumbledore, the real Imperial Wizard, would not stand for this. They also generously invited women to join their groups. They're very, very racist and horrible groups. And their numbers grew dangerously high, even starting to affect democratic politics in the South. Though it is a low point of the 1920s, it is still a significant one, exemplifying the extreme racism of the age. Squeaking by at number 7 was the restriction on immigration. I guess some Americans thought it was a little too crowded at Ellis Island. Racism and competition drove this aversion to the non-native people and led to bills such as the Immigration Act of 1921. This set a specific limit on immigrants to America each year. Bills such as this enacted in the 1920s drove practices and principles that we still use today. Even today, we ask, how many immigrants is too many immigrants? A true underdog story coming in at number 6 was the Scopes trial of 1925. Always a thinker, John Scopes took it upon himself to teach his young Tennessee students about evolution. For those of you unfamiliar with the term, it is in essence that all humans are descendants of monkeys. I definitely believe with you in some cases, John. In more political terms, he was attempting to teach evolution over creationism, which was the accepted belief of the time, stemming from the best-selling book, the Bible. Adam and Eve, you know the story, folks. Mr. Scopes was guilty as charged, as founded by the Supreme Court, due to the Tennessee law forbidding the teaching of evolution. This also established religious fundamentals over modernity in America. Coming in at a firm number 5 was Mr. Henry Ford. Quite the man of the decade, he not only named the automobile after himself, but he also established assembly line production. Though the first cars were not made in the 1920s, he did improve them vastly. He made them a #1 commodity to have in America. A fairly impressive feat, Mr. Ford's assembly lines were known to make one car every 90 minutes. And if that seems great, keep your socks on for this next fact. By 1925, Mr. Ford's assembly lines were producing one car every 10 seconds. Mr. Ford, you continually amaze me. The auto industry in general provided for a great market for other industries such as steel, glass, and rubber. Not only this, but they widened the horizons of many Americans. With these new vehicles, you could see the vast tundra of North Dakota, the sandy deserts of Utah, and all the other obscure places in America that people tend to forget about. Coming in at number 4, but not quite making the top 3, sorry, was the New Age of Literature. This introduced new men such as F. Scott Fitzgerald and Ernest Hemingway, hoping to touch America with the written word. These authors' opinions and comments about the time period rang out loud and clear through their cleverly written metaphors that are actually very hard to understand when trying to write an essay about. In our number 3 spot, we have the terrifying, the earth-shattering, the excruciatingly frightening, not maroon, but Red Scare of the 1920s. The Red Scare began when Wilson deemed it appropriate to send American troops overseas to communist Russia in support of their overthrow of the Tsar. Paranoia swept America, especially in the form of one man named A. Mitchell Palmer. He went on things that were infamously titled Palmer Raids. These raids were him finding random American citizens and accusing them of being communists or Reds, which common misconception has no correlation to their hair color, and convicting them without any evidence. These raids continued until the scare died out at the end of the 1920s. Immigrants were commonly accused of being communists due to them already being a disliked people in America, and immigration rates plummeted even further than they had after the Immigration Act. Keeping immigrants out seemed to be America's solution to keeping communists out. Coming down to our number 2 spot, we have the cringeworthy, the devastating, the only way to end an era of prosperity, the stock market crash of 1929. This really put a damper on the whole roaring 20s idea of the age. It led to a deep depression, which I'm sure you've all heard of. It was pretty great. In just 4 days, the stock market lost half of its fortune. Now, I do not have a PhD in economics, but I can assure you, losing half the fortune of the stock market is not an ideal route to take. The crash ended an entire era of prosperity and led to one of the darkest moments in American history. And no, I'm not referring to the NFL lockout of 2011. This most definitely earned the number 2 spot on our countdown. Now, you may be inquiring, gee whiz, what could possibly be more important than the stock market crash of 1929? Well, I'm here to ask you, please, join me as I think outside of the box, because the number 1 event in 1920s history was the groundbreaking, earth-shattering, devastating, life-altering, universe-spinning invention of sliced bread. That's right, sliced bread. That sandwich you're going to eat at lunch, that bread, it was invented in the 1920s. So you take that fact and you run with it. So there you have it. The top 11 events of 1920s history. Tune in next time Miss McLaughlin assigns us a creative assignment. Until then, bye-bye everybody.